Well, with Audrey's comments earlier about love being putting another's needs above your own, lots of stories do come to mind. And the first one I'll share is from my faith tradition. I'm a lifelong Lutheran Christian. And this story comes to us from the book of Luke, the 10th chapter. A Torah expert, an expert in the law, stood up to examine Jesus. And he said, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus answered, "What do you read in the Torah? What is written there? You shall love the Lord your God with the whole of your mind and the whole of your life and the whole of your strength, the whole of you, and love your neighbor as yourself." Yeah, you've given the right answer, said Jesus. Yeah, do this and you'll live. But, wanting to be fully, strictly observant, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" And Jesus answered with a story. He said, some guy was walking down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he was set upon by a band of robbers, and they stripped him, and they beat him, and they went away, leaving him there, abandoning him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest came down that road and saw him pass by on the other side. Likewise, a Levite came, saw him, and passed by on the other side. But then a Samaritan was traveling and came by, and when he saw him, he felt it in the pit of his stomach, and he went to him, and he took him and bandaged his wounds and poured oil and wine on them and lifted him onto his own donkey and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next morning, he gave 2 denarii to the innkeeper and said, "Take care of him. Whatever more you pay, when I come back, I will repay you." Which of these 3 was neighbor to the man who had been set upon by robbers? The one who did mercy to him. Go, walk this path, and do likewise. Now, most of us here, thank you, probably realize that that story is the source of the common cultural phrase of being a good Samaritan, someone going out of their way, perhaps sometimes even putting themselves in danger to meet the needs of someone else. So here's a story about being a neighbor. It comes to us from Ireland. Because it comes from Ireland, and I've been in Ireland, I'm afraid my mouth begins to slide a little bit towards the Irish, just a bit, when I tell this story. You see, long ago, there was an old man and an old woman, and their children were grown and gone. No one else was nearby. They lived, just the 2 of them, and their home out in the countryside, outside of the village. And every night, when the day's work was done, the old woman would take the potatoes and peel them and put all the potato peelings into the slops bucket. Now, I'm sure you all here know what a slops bucket is. I don't have one at my house. No, a slops bucket. Well, now I use a garbage disposal, or we have the trash and garbage pickup, or maybe a composting pile. But if you have a pig, well, that's nice. You put all your food leftovers and scrapings together and feed them to the pig and mix them up with maybe some liquid, and that's your slops. But if you don't have a pig anymore, well, that was the situation for the old man and the old woman. They used to have pigs, but no longer. But they still had this bucket that they put all the potato peelings, and then she would scrape the carrots and put the carrot scrapings in there, and then peel the onions, put all the papery onion skins into the slops bucket. And after their fine supper, they would do up the dishes and pour all the dirty dishwater right into the slops bucket. And then the old man, he'd go and he'd pick up that bucket, and oh, the older he got, the heavier that bucket seemed to get. But he would take it and he would walk out the door in the front of their house, and he would walk the 6, 7, or 8 steps across the front garden. Now, here we might call it a yard. There in Ireland, they call it a garden. And he would take the slops and he would toss them over the garden wall. Now, I told you they lived out in the country, so all there was next to the garden wall was a bit of empty field with sticks and stones and earth and grass, excuse me, and sometimes flowers, depending on the season. And that's what they would do with their slops every night. Until one night, the old woman peeled the potatoes, put the peelings in the slops bucket, scraped the carrots, and all the carrot scrapings went into that bucket. The papery onion skins went into the slops bucket. After their fine supper, doing up the dishes, the dirty dishwater went right into the slops bucket. And as usual, the old man leaned over and he picked it up, and oh my, it was heavy, but he carried it with all of his old bones out the door in the front of their house, across the front garden, over to the garden wall, and he tossed the slops over like he always did. And then all of a sudden he heard, "Here is a thing in his life." And he went scurrying back inside, and he called to his wife, "Wife, let me tell you what happened. You won't believe it." And he told her, and she did believe it. And she said, "Oh, what was it, do you suppose?" He said, "Well, I don't know." She said, "Well, do you suppose maybe it was one of the wee people?" Now, maybe you know, but just in case you don't, I'll tell you. The wee people, by that she meant what you and I might call leprechauns. That's what she said. Do you suppose it was one of the wee people? Because they were known to be magical and hiding about, and you couldn't see them if they didn't want you to. And he said, "Well, I don't know if they were. Or I don't know if it was." And he didn't. Well, the next day, the day went on, supper time came, and all the potato peelings, carrot scrapings, and onion skins, and then the dirty dishwater went into the slops bucket. The old man picked it up. He went out the door in the front of the house. He crossed the front garden. He went to that stone garden wall, and he took the slops bucket and he tossed it over. And then he heard, "Don't." The old man held his ground. And he looked all around, front and back, and he looked up and he looked down, and there, right there, down by his feet, down by the base of the stone wall, there was a wee man with a bushy beard and a pointed cap and a feather sticking out of it. And that wee man looked up at the old man and he said, "I wish you'd stop throwing your slops onto me house." And the old man leaned on the front garden wall and looked over, and he did not see any house. He just saw the sticks and stones and grasses and bits of flowers amidst all the slops he'd thrown over. And he came back and he said, "But I don't see anything there." And so the wee man said, "Put the tip of your boot onto the tip of my shoe and then look over." So he very carefully placed the tip of his boot onto the tip of the wee man's shoe, which thankfully was quite long and pointed. So it was a little less dangerous than he thought it might have been. And thus connected, the old man leaned over and looked over the wall, and there, right there, he saw a wee village. Oh, he could see houses and shops and a church with a steeple sticking up down there and there. Right there was a house that had a roof that was, well, that might have been red, but it was hard to see because it was covered all over with potato peelings, and carrot scrapings were stuck to the walls of the house, and the yard was filled with papery onion skins, and dirty dishwater was flowing down the chimney and out through the front door, and inside the house he could hear a wee woman's screams coming out. Oh, thought the man. He went running back inside. Wife, let me tell you what happened. You won't believe it. And he told her, and she did believe it. And she said, oh, that poor wee woman. I don't know what I'd do if some giant came along and dumped his dirty dishwasher down my chimney and across my clean floor out to my front door. Husband, you've got to do something. There's nothing for it. You've simply got to take the slops and take them around across the back garden and toss them over the back garden wall from now on. What are the chances of a second wee magical village being back there? He said, oh, wife, I'm sure you're right, but I can barely find the strength to cross the front garden and toss that heavy bucket of slops over the front garden wall. I don't think I have the strength in me to go all the way around the house and then across the back garden and toss it then over the back garden wall. For you see, they only had the one door in the front of the house. Ah, said the wife, there's nothing for it. We're just going to have to get the village carpenter to come and build us a new door in the back of the house. Oh, but wife, that will cost a pretty penny. I don't believe we have enough. Oh, husband, you don't know everything. And she went and she found a little cubby in the kitchen, and she took out a little sock and she poured the contents onto the kitchen table, and there was a small pile of coppers and other coins and even a bit of silver. And so they took what they had and they went to the village carpenter, and the next day he came and he knocked a hole and filled it in with a wonderful new door right in the back of their house. And that night, after she put all the potato peelings and the carrot scrapings and the onion skins into that slops bucket, and after their fine supper and doing the dishes, the dirty dishwater went in, the old man went over and he picked up that heavy bucket, and oh, it was heavier than ever, it seemed. And he walked out the brand new door in the back of their house. And he walked just the 6, 7, or 8 steps across the back garden. When he got to the back garden wall, he took that bucket, and with all of his old strength in his bones, he tossed the slops over the back wall, and he waited. The only thing he heard was a lark singing over in the top of a shrub. So that's what he did from that night on. And even though they had spent all of the bits of coins that had been squirreled away, they were never in want. For every single Sunday night, when the old man picked up that heavy bucket and opened up that back door to take them out, there was a sound, a little clink, 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 clink. And there rolled from under that back door, right into the middle of the kitchen floor, a wee silver coin, a gift from one good neighbor to another. I do have one more story, but I have to wet my whistle first. So I thought for my third story to share with you tonight, I told a biblical story. I've told a traditional tale. I'm going to finish by sharing a personal story, something that very definitely happened to me. I was fortunate when I was in high school. You see, I lived in a very white town in the middle of Wisconsin. And maybe a lot of you know that one definition of what we could call white privilege is that white history is what everybody studies, and any other history is an elective, if offered at all. Well, I was fortunate in my high school to have a pair of teachers, husband and wife. One was a history teacher and the other an English teacher. They taught such an elective called racial minorities. And I learned a lot of things as a teenager back in the 70s about things that I wouldn't have learned otherwise at that time. We had 4 different sections on Black and Native American and Hispanic, although I think we called it Chicano at that time, and Asian histories in the United States. I learned a lot of things. And I kind of tucked that into my mind, into my heart in the years since. And I thought that I was pretty aware. I thought that, that I was, I guess that's the way to put it. I was pretty aware. Well, let me tell you something that happened. A few years ago, I was having dinner with my youngest son and his wife. We don't live in the same state, so it's not anything that happens very often. So we were delighted to be together. I was visiting them. We were out to eat and we had some wine and we were going to raise our glasses to toast the joy of being together. As I raised my glass, leaned it across to my son and daughter-in-law, when we clinked our glasses, I didn't say to your health. I didn't say cheers. I said something that in my family, my Norwegian, German, very white family, that we'd always said because it was a fun onomatopoeia, especially when a large group of us would be together at a holiday, perhaps, and a big table, and you couldn't reach everyone's glass across when you wanted to do a toast with the whole family. We had this onomatopoeia that we would say as we raised our glasses. So that's what I said. Raised my glass to my daughter-in-law, and I said, chink. And she went, oh. And I was all, what? What? She said, oh, no. And I was all, what? What? That's what we always. And it dawned on me and punched me in the gut that I had just uttered an offensive racial slur right in the face of my half-Chinese beloved daughter-in-law. I said, oh, no, I never even thought. That's not on my radar. I've maybe heard that in the movie. I've never used it. We've always done it. She said, no. And I'm so grateful that we had enough respect and trust and love that she could confront me about that, not just cringe and let it go. And I realized that, as aware I thought I was, there's always something to learn. And I learned in my gut, as well as in my heart, that no matter how innocent or well-intentioned, whatever I do will have an impact on someone else. And even if it's something I've always done, my family always said, chink. Oh, no. Once I learned how impactful that was in a harmful way, I had to change. It's not always easy to change. But if we're fortunate, we learn how, as best we can and when we can, when needed, to put someone else's needs above our own or our own comfort. And that's a story that I like to call raising a glass to my teachers, whether back in high school or within my family and among my neighbors. Thank you. Thank you. I just saw that someone had put in the chat the request that I repeat the name of the book. It's Laughter, Silence, and Shouting. I'll type it in as well. I'll type in the compiler's name into the chat. I'll put that right now. Kathy, Aeay. It's a very different last name.
Thank you, Pam, for that beautiful set of stories. Wow.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, what a gifted teller you are.
Thank you.
So we take a breath and we offer some appreciation for continuous learning.